Hello, welcome back, y'all. Today we're going to be taking a look at recommendation letters. I feel like in the month of April, by now, if not already, now is the time to start as a junior looking into recommendation letters and what that should be all about. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. How important are recommendation letters? I wrote out an overview of the admissions process here, and again, a grain of salt for any time I try to give some sort of one size fits all kind of rubric or metric like this. But I think it's fair to say that number one and two, first two things that they'll try to confirm is your grades and your test scores, or in other words, your academic profile. Your academic profile needs to be within a reasonable range of their expectations. If you do have good or competitive scores, let's say you're in the 50 percentile of the average GPA or test scores from previous years, then you really don't have to worry about the first two. It's going to be the everything else, the holistic assessment elements that's going to matter more, the essays, the extracurriculars. But again, there are some students that are still pretty borderline, or they're maybe struggling to reach higher in an academic tier to get into a school. In which case, I give this 60 to 40 kind of split. If you are, I'd argue, as a whole, 60% of your decision will come down to your academic profile, and then the 40% is everything else. Right away, I think experienced counselors will have a red flag with my statement there, and I fully welcome any kind of scrutiny regarding that, because the truth is it varies for each student and for each college. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're applying to Stanford and you have a 3.4 unweighted GPA. Then it's no longer a 60-40 and you could try to clutch it with your 40%. At that point, it's swung completely against your favor with that 3.4 unweighted GPA. It would be like 99.9% to 0.1, right? So 99% of your decision will just come down to the fact that your grades and test scores aren't good enough and you'll get rejected. Why am I not saying 100%? Because the 3.4 unweighted GPA, maybe there's some super rare exceptions that maybe it's a socioeconomic issue, personal challenge or hardship. Maybe you're a world-class athlete. Maybe you're like Michael Phelps or something. So I can't give that full 100, but 99.9% of the time, if your grade is a 3.4, that alone is not going to get you over the initial filter, the initial hump for a school like Stanford. Conversely, let's say that you had really good scores, right, and really good test scores. Then your academic decision, the academic profile, the decision of that is not going to be based on whether you had, 6 APs scores of a 5 versus 7 APs over 5, right? Let's not, at that point it doesn't really matter. At that point, I'd say everything else, the second part, the essays, the extracurricular activities, teacher recommendations, and interviews, they're going to take up 80%, 90% of the reason why you'll ultimately get accepted, waitlisted, deferred, or denied. But yeah, I think if I had to give a general assessment for a layman student who's starting off, I'd say get your grades first. That's you gotta meet the academic profile expectations. So that's about 60% of the challenge as a high school student, and the next 40% is getting in with your activities, your endeavorment, your student qualities, your uniqueness. Teacher recommendations fit into the latter part. Teacher recommendations are part of the holistic assessment. If I had to break down teacher recommendations, for me, if it's a decent recommendation, I'll have a rubric at probably the last slide where I do a scale of like 1 to 5, 5 being an amazing recommendation letter. If you are scoring maybe if you expect a teacher recommendation that's like lukewarm, that's pretty average, decent enough, maybe a 3 or 4, then a teacher recommendation can maybe be 1 to 3% of the reason why you get accepted. But if your teacher recommendation is literally like 1 out of 5, it's a terrible rec. Like, this kid sucks is what the recommendation letter writes or says. If that happens, then that 1 to 3% effect actually now becomes 40%, 50%, right? Like, you can have pretty decent all-around admission aspects, but if your teacher recommendations come off very negatively, that could be a huge red flag, and it could be 30-40% of the reason why admission committee and readers will go ahead and ultimately deny you compared to another student who doesn't have such red flags. So teacher recommendations, they're, again, I guess I'm playing with fire with these ratios, these numbers, but I still feel like I can stand generally by the ratios that I'm presenting here today. I think teacher recommendations, if it's done decently, could be a pat on the back on your app, an extra layer of small insurance, so that 1 to 3% extra boost. Whereas if it's not good, it could be very bad for you. It could be minus 20, 30, 40% of your chances. So teacher recommendations, ironically, small boost, big potential downside. Yeah. Application requirements. So if we have to do teacher recommendations, how many do we need? Who do we need to ask it from? Generally speaking, there are 2 academic teacher requests that we're going to go for. Some colleges, I think either MIT or Caltech or both, will request one from a STEM teacher and one from humanities. And they'll typically ask it from a 11th grade teacher, a junior teacher. Other schools or schools additionally will ask for 1 to 2 supplemental recommenders. I've seen it all. Some colleges, I mean, maybe it was Johns Hopkins that said like this year they don't want any supplementals, or maybe they asked for 1 or 2. Some schools don't even indicate how many they want or whether you need to submit one. So it gets really complicated when you get into the details of things. But generally speaking, for parents and students, how many teacher recs do I need for college applications? Typically 2 from a teacher, 2 from teachers, and then 1 or 2 from a supplemental recommender. What are supplemental recommenders? They could be an additional teacher, but ideally they're an adult that can vouch for you for either a sports that you play at a high level. Maybe it's an internship or research summer program you attended and you hit it off really well with the professor adjunct there. Supplemental recommenders can also be things like pastors, long-term commitment types of people. Ideally, it's not someone who's doesn't really have a name or reputation. I think like status makes a difference. So if it's like your local tutor who's tutored you for 5 years, it sounds great, and they probably have honestly a better measure of your studentship than some of the other people you may ask, but it doesn't come off as valuable if it's not coming from some form of stature or status. So the supplemental recommenders, ideally you want to be looking for the options through summer or through extracurricular activities. Note, high school counselor reports are automatically included. So a question I get at this point is, what about my high school counselor? Don't I need to ask my high school counselor for a letter of recommendation? And the answer is, it depends on the high school, but generally speaking, a high school counselor report or recommendation is already included as part of the secondary school report. That secondary school report is sent to colleges usually around January or February if you're applying regular. If you're applying early, sometimes you request that and you could send it earlier. But your high school counselor will be automatic. You generally don't have to ask for it. However, some high school counselors will ask you to start filling out questionnaires like packets, teacher recommendation packets, things like that. Whereas other counselors, I don't know how they find out about you. You only meet them maybe once every year. So in grand total of maybe 3 hours of total met over the 4 years of your high school tenure there, and your high school counselor still has to come up with writing something about you and giving you a report. So I'm not too concerned about the high school counselor report. I have a separate slide for how to fill out packets if you're ever asked about that. So we'll move into that. But generally speaking, you are looking for 2 academic teachers, 1 supplemental or 2 supplementals. Ideally, your academic teachers are going to be from 1 STEM and 1 humanities. Who should you ask as a result? 1 STEM and 1 humanities, and ideally 1 supplemental. There you go. 1 size fits all. But my school doesn't require blah blah, and I totally get that. Maybe you don't have MIT or Caltech on your college list. So, and you realize that I don't have a strong STEM teacher, but I do have 2 strong humanities teachers. You're going to run into a lot of questions like that, okay? So to guide you through that decision process, because every decision is going to be personal and unique, and you should probably talk to someone who knows your case on a one-to-one basis. But normally, and I guess like overarchingly, you want to ask a teacher that can vouch for your studentship the most, okay? Sometimes if the application doesn't require it and you just hear the saying that you need a STEM humanities and you just force yourself to go with a STEM teacher that doesn't think highly of you, that can actually backfire on you, right? Sometimes it might be better if restrictions allow for you to choose two humanities teachers that really can just laud you and give you praise, versus trying to go with these typical proto structure, like these combinations that people tell you to go with. So while I'm suggesting the one size fits all, one STEM and one humanities, understand that every student's situation is different. And the best way to navigate or decide that for yourself is to start with the basic question: who will vouch for me? Who will fight for me and show others that I am very capable, I'm very valuable as a student? And I want to clarify what that means. It could mean leadership, but when I'm looking at a valuable student, or if I'm looking at studentship, I'm looking at things that honestly some students and a lot of parents don't really focus on or give credence to. And it's your intellectual vitality, it's your social skills in the classroom, whether you're super toxic to others or whether you're super engaging and you have the type of relationship with peers and with faculty that people will then kind of, I guess, like they think highly of you. The social strata, I suppose, comes into play here. Your activeness, it could be basic, like being active in class, to also spending time above and beyond to help others in class, things of that nature. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. When should I ask for one? So I think now is a good time. Month of April is when you should start looking out for recommendation procedures, and start listening in on maybe some of your junior teachers talking about college application stuff. Like sometimes a teacher will just straight up come out with it and say, don't you dare talk to me about any rec letters until the AP exams are over. Or other teacher will say, I have a wait list. You can fill out the wait list online, yada, yada, yada. But bottom line, April is a good time to start. May is kind of when I see a lot of it kicking up and getting into high gear. So if you ask in May, sometimes you might be a little late. I think April is fine though. Bear in mind that you're asking not to get a letter right away, because the majority of teachers will actually write you a letter of rec throughout the summer and even hold until the beginning of senior year to actually write one for you, like even as late as September or October. Your job as a student is to just make sure that you're aware of what the procedures are from the teachers you want to ask it from. Some will ask you to wait until the summer, as I mentioned, and then the key is to find out in April what the procedures are for intended teachers. So make sure that you're thinking about it now if you are a junior. How should I approach my teachers to ask? I just went ahead and listed out 3 dialogue approaches, okay? So first one is, hi, I was wondering if you had a process for writing letters of recommendations for college applications, and if you'd be willing to write one for me. That one's a little bit more forward. The second one, hi, I was wondering if I could request a recommendation letter from you in the fall for my college applications, and what I could do to prepare to increase your willingness to write me one. And then last but not least, hi, do you happen to take recommendation letter requests for college applications next year, and see if you could get started that way. There's no super secret, effective way to go about this. Just you have to find the time to go up and ask. Either it's after class, it's during lunch. Maybe you're in a good position because you're the teacher you intend to ask is also your club advisor during break time. Whatever it is, you just got to go up and ask, and it does, take the answer as they will. What to write on the recommendation questionnaire. So some teachers will just go ahead and write you something. Okay. Other teachers will ask you to fill out a questionnaire. High school counselors, like when you're doing a counselor report, a counselor recommendation letter, they may ask you to fill out a teacher recommendation packet as well. I'm in the process of helping some students go through this, and I thought I wanted to air out my thoughts on what I'm seeing and how I would want to rectify what I'm seeing. At the end of the day, your questionnaire should be filled with tangible examples. Key, detailed examples of your actions, your experiences, your challenges, and your growths. For example, let's say through your letter, you want to be able to showcase or in your questionnaire, you want to be able to showcase how you took the initiative and organized the History Chronicles page for the entire class. Notice how I said History Chronicles pages, right? Not history assignment. So the details you give, the specific projects, the specific assignments that you worked on, that gives a little bit more clarity. That gives a little bit more color and uniqueness. And so please be sure to include details of experiences. And by the way, it says, and mastered the material enough to present it to the entire school, so the experience. Initially struggled with the combinatorics math project, but didn't give up and showed a deep commitment and passion for self-resourcefulness and personal desire to improve. And number 3, leads the school's stock club in spite of all the other tasks and intensive class schedule, and yet still managed to show level-headedness, time management skills, and a strong sense of going above and beyond. Okay, what you're going to notice about all 3 of those examples is that, number 1, that they're detailed, okay? And number 2, that they don't end with the resume flex of, oh, he was number 1, he was a concert master. It goes into the qualities, it goes into the growth, the character. So the key is to show through examples and experiences, detailed examples and experiences, humble growth, and defining qualities and characteristics. Remember, experience and achievements, not alone, okay? Experience and achievements plus reflections, growth, values, character, and aspirations. Most students that I work with, okay, most parents, okay, they focus on achievement, okay? And as a result, you're going to come off as one of those typical students that have the high stature, the high academics, the high profile, but none of the desirables, the softer skills that really a lot of students lack. And so make sure that when you're filling out questionnaires that you're not just mentioning detailed experiences and achievements, but you're attaching to that reflections about your growth, your values, your character, your drives. What not to write on a recommendation questionnaire. So I thought I'd clarify this and offer 2 examples. I've literally read this on a senior on a teacher recommendation packet before. My son is so talented. Ever since he started with Legos, I knew he would be an engineer. By the way, the whole Legos and engineering thing is super cliche. I would avoid it at all cost. Granted, with that being said, can someone write an essay about Legos and still get into Harvard or Stanford or Carnegie Mellon or any other great school? My answer would be yes, they can, but like 99% of the time, you probably can't, and it's really hard to do. But anyways, I got off track. Let's read that one more time. My son is so talented. Ever since he started with Legos, I knew he would be a great engineer. Here's how you fix that in the questionnaire when you're writing a response. My son began rather typically with Legos, but quickly got into building computers by middle school, attending the Computer Builders Summer Camp where he not only won first prize for his build, but also began to expand his interest towards programming. He's been using his weekends ever since to learn Java to C Sharp, and is extremely passionate about his USACO team. There's a couple typos there. Sorry about that, but I hope you guys get the point. You can replace the my son if it's not a parent questionnaire with a student questionnaire. I began rather typically with Legos, but you guys could get the point there. There's detail, experience and achievement detail, and then there's a reflection about growth and a sense of direction. My daughter is going to be a great doctor one day and has performed at Carnegie Hall multiple times. Fixed. My daughter's long commitment and involvement at Union Hospital's geriatric ward has humbled her to see there's so much wisdom to absorb from the patients she cares for there. She often spends holidays at their bedside and uses much of her allowance to ensure they are given thoughtful gifts. Aw. Dang it, I wish more parents wrote stuff like this, man. If parents wrote stuff like this, I feel like this is such a breath of fresh air to me compared to the sea of other things that I've seen parents write. And students, right? I feel like parents and students, they have this assumption that you need to just be touting your resume flexes. But really what stands out to me is the smaller, more personal things that you write. Anyways, likewise, she's been endeavoring as the president of the Giving Club to try to introduce more students to the opportunity and has been working with other clubs on campus, including the school orchestra, to offer musical events in partnership with the hospital. So immediate fixes, I hope that you get what I'm trying to say and you see it very clearly, the difference. We're focusing on details of experiences and achievements and ending with aspirations, making sure that the signal for these achievements is not about resume flexing. It's much more about showing personal growth, personal aspirations, characters, and qualities. The truth about recommendation letters. First thing I want to note, okay? I see this a lot. Oh, I heard that he's a very great recommendation writer. I would be wary of those kinds of people, man. I think that the more famous a teacher is, the more the teacher probably will be critical about you. So if you're not a super excellent student, right, and you're reaching out to a teacher who's very popular for a request, that teacher is probably going to run out of steam when he's trying to write for you, right? He's going to write, or she's going to write the best she can or he can for the true, high tier students that he acknowledges. And if you're not capable, or if you're not confident that you're in that upper echelon in his favor, then it might actually be a bad idea to ask a famous teacher for a recommendation letter. This is where you need to be very humble, parents and students both. Like I've seen some parents and students say, yeah, we're going to get a great letter of recommendation from that guy. And I have this like, are you sure? I don't say that aloud, but I have my doubts and skepticism because I've seen the student. And when I'm seeing the student doesn't know his A's from his B's. He doesn't know how to organize his own time. He's great at grades. He gets 5s, on his tests, and he's very diligent with his homework, and he gets A's on his exams. But when it comes to everything else, his personality, he looks at the ground when he talks. He's very quiet, right? I see those kinds of situations, and I see the parents especially go, oh yeah, we're not worried about the rec letter. It's going to be great. And I can't say anything. I kind of hold my tongue. But then the results become the results, right? But yeah, be wary of famous teachers and be humble. Okay, you're not trying to get the most famous or the best teacher writer, because oftentimes it may backfire on you. It's better for you to find where you personally can say that a teacher will vouch for you. And you have to be very honest with that thought process. I see a lot of people who are woefully ignorant of themselves or their son or daughter when it comes to their true studentship and aptitude. And this is where someone like me, someone like a college counselor who's seen a lot of students over the years can give you an honest assessment. I think the best thing you can ask a counselor such as myself is to be honest about the student assessment, all right, and not and put me in a position where I have to give you some hard truths. Okay, a great letter doesn't have to be written by a great writer. Okay, oh, I'm worried about this teacher because she doesn't speak English that well. There's a degree of concern there, absolutely. Okay, but I've seen not so grammatically great letters still get accepted to top tier schools. And the reason behind it doesn't have nothing to do with the grammar or the writing style. It has to do with the content. It has to do with the detail of praise. So recommendation letter scores, let's scale it let's do it on a scale of 1 to 5. Every college is going to do it differently, but let's just do 1 to 5, 5 being the best, right? When do I know I have an amazing recommendation letter? When do I know I've got a 5? Usually inside that letter, you'll see something like, oh man, this is the best kid in my entire 16 years career of teaching at a public school. Something like that might come up. So there's this extremes. There's these top notions. A 4 score is still very strong. A 4 will still get you into, in my opinion, top tier schools, right? And it's to indicate that you're gifted, you're strong, you're a great performer. Not necessarily top 3, but a solid choice. Number 3, I feel is more lukewarm, or like a score of a 3 out of 5 is kind of more lukewarm. It's more pros and cons. Like he's great in these areas, but he's got room to improve in these areas. That's what famous teachers do a lot, by the way. A lot of famous teacher writings happen to be 3s to me because the student overestimates himself or herself and then asks for the famous teacher's rec letter. And the famous teacher just goes to town and just gives a straight, blunt assessment. And honestly, it helps the admissions in colleges. Like those are the best for admission college readers because they get to see an honest assessment of the pros and cons or the strengths and weaknesses of the student. Number 2, or 2 out of 5 is not a good rec letter. Obviously, it shows that you're struggling more than you're succeeding. And then 1 out of 5 is, I've seen this before, where a teacher says this kid has much to grow. Sorry, and it requires a lot of assisted blah 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 blah. Right. So a 1 out of 5 means we just miscalibrated, or More often than not, we know that the rec letters to ask from anyone else is not going to be good. The student knows that he's kind of not a great candidate or not really strong in college admissions process, and we just have to ask for one anyways to just meet the requirement to submit. The goal is to get to maybe 3, 4. Obviously, 5 comes down to student aptitude. You can't just demand a 5. As parents, we can't just expect a 5. I honestly think that if you want to get a 5, you have to nurture that since when they're young. You got to nurture that kind of stuff because it's an amalgamation. It's an accumulation of many years of training and personality development that really comes into becoming a top 3 candidate. I see a lot of parents that don't bother with this, focus too much on after school academies. So they're spending 5, 6, 7 hours a day at an after school, and they're pumping out great numbers. They're getting straight A's, 1550 SAT score. But when you have a chance to sit down and have a conversation with the student is just woefully socially inept. Right? I've seen a lot of that. That kind of stuff takes years of development, and it requires parental insight and understanding earlier on that it's not just about the academics. You got to be helping them develop their mind, their social skills. That all will come into play on recommendation letters. But anyways, yeah, that was the last of it. I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you're currently a junior and it's May by the time you're watching this, hopefully, get on it. Get to work figuring out what your recommendation letter procedures are like at your school from your high school counselor, and then start eyeballing teachers and asking around, and maybe asking a professional some advice about who your choices are. Real quick tip, my suggestion is don't ask, hey, who should my recommendation letters be? That's a newbie question, okay? The question you should ask instead is, Jay, I've got teacher A who's blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. We had years of experience doing this, and I think he could vouch for me in these kinds of ways, versus teacher B. Teacher B, I've known for 2 more years, but I don't have that blah, 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 and blah. So you're giving out details, right? So when you're asking yourself the question, who should I ask? Or if you're asking a professional, who should I ask? Make sure that you are coming to that question with more details in preparation. And later on, in a later segment or later video, I'll go deeper into one of the qualities I think I see separating top tier students from not, and it's the type of questions they ask. There are newbie questions, and then there are well prepared and actionable questions. When you're asking questions, who should I ask for a recommendation letter? Start stacking the options up. Okay, this option A, teacher, has this, and this going for it, but this and this and this, that might be a problem. Option B has the following. And if you can list that out and summarize it succinctly and present that to someone like me, that gives me a much better window to give you much better advice. I hope that was helpful. Thanks for dropping by, and I'll see you next time.